Augusta. Thank you, Bill, for the introduction. Thank you to the Aiken Republican Party for helping to put this together. And thank you all for being here. Are you ready to help me send Joe Biden back to his basement in Delaware where he belongs? I don't know if you've been following his latest stumbles, but he just finished an event recently saying, "God save the Queen." No, no, no. God save the United States of America. We need it. We need a new direction. We see what's happening in this country. Are you paying less at the grocery store than you did before Biden was in office? Of course not. Are you looking to see what's happening in cities across this country? I actually was in San Francisco this week, believe it or not. And you hear about it, we talk about it, but there's something very jarring when you pull up and you see somebody defecating on the sidewalk. You see people using fentanyl in open-air drug markets or smoking crack cocaine. You see businesses shuttered and boarded up like they have really since the start of COVID. It was a civilization in decline that I witnessed. And did that just happen by accident? No. It is the result of leftist politicians imposing leftist ideology in cities and states across this country. And it was interesting because I'm walking around and I was doing an interview with the Daily Wire. They're going to put something out soon. And so we're doing a thing with Daily Wire. And, you know, some of the people doing the drugs didn't know who I was, but some, look, this is San Francisco. There's a left-wing activist every block, basically. So some of those people recognize me. They start chirping, whatever. I'm glad they're chirping at me, right? But it was interesting because those folks are chirping nasty to me. But the fire truck goes by. Firefighters out the window, they're cheering for me in San Francisco. The police officers. The police officers do a beeline across, and they're thanking me for standing up for law and order and standing up for law enforcement. And so you see, if those folks were in charge, the city would probably be in good shape. But it's not. You have leftist ideology, and you're seeing that all across the country. We're also seeing the effects of an open border on this country. And I'm going to be down at the border again on Monday. You know, in Florida, we're fighting back even though we're not on the southern border. I have troops down there helping Texas right now. We've done things like ban sanctuary cities in Florida, increase penalties for smuggling illegal aliens into our state. We even sent illegal aliens to beautiful Martha's Vineyard, and they said they were a sanctuary jurisdiction. They actually had an office in their little downtown that said, nobody's illegal, everyone's welcome, refugee center. And so, you know, you think, okay, they're there. Did they accept? No, they kicked them out the next day. It was all virtue signaling. So we've been involved in a lot. And actually, we're a maritime state. So I have a maritime border. Coast Guard is in charge of doing the interdictions, but they don't have enough people. Biden's not going to send more. So they'll try to run boats, illegal boats, from Haiti and places like that and make it to southern Florida. So we have our maritime assets assisting the Coast Guard. We're making interdictions, turning over to Coast Guard, and they get repatriated back to Haiti or Cuba or wherever. And guess what? We've done over 12,000 repatriations of illegal aliens in the last 7 months alone. It works. And when they do the boats and they realize that they are not going to make it through, guess what? Fewer boats try to do it. And I think there's a lesson for the southern border. If they came and were not allowed to be entered into the United States, fewer people would come. We'll get to that in a minute, but it's a big problem. So I look around this country, and we are off our rocker as a nation with all these problems. It's a country, unfortunately, that's headed towards decline. And I'm running for president because I don't accept that decline. I think that decline is a choice. It's not an inevitability. I am not interested in being like some Republicans, get into office and just say we're going to manage the decline a little bit better than the Democrats will. We'll be a little less liberal than they will, maybe slow down their liberalism. No, I want to reverse the decline. I want to get us on a fundamentally better path. And to do that, we need to restore sanity in this country. We need to return normalcy to our communities. We need to reinstate integrity into our institutions. Truth needs to be our foundation, and common sense can no longer be an uncommon virtue. And we've got a lot of work to do. I can tell you this, we will work on day one to reverse Biden's disastrous economic policies. This is what you see at the grocery store and what you see in different prices, that is not something that just happened by accident. That is a government-induced inflation that you are contending with. You go back to Fauci in March of 20. The Federal Reserve printed trillions and trillions of dollars. The Congress borrowed and spent trillions and trillions of dollars. March of 20, December of 20, March of 2021, trillions and trillions of dollars. Look, if you could just borrow and print indefinitely with no consequence, then heck, why don't we just do 50 trillion and make everybody happy, right? But we know that's not the way the world works. We know at the end of the day, somebody has to pay the price for this type of behavior. And who has paid the price? You have paid the price. The inflation is an invisible tax that affects every American. It affects some more than others. You know, some of the elites, their assets go up, all this. It's not as bad for them. It's a lot harder for working people who are trying to make ends meet. Who benefits from this in particular? DC elites benefit from it. Right now in our country, 7 of the 10 wealthiest counties in America are suburbs of Washington, D.C. Now, I've been there. I know a little bit about it. They're not producing very much other than mountains of debt and a lot of hot air. And yet, where is that wealth coming from? The wealth is coming from using the levers of government to benefit the insiders and making everybody else pay the bill. That stops on day one when we get in on January 20th, 2025. It's done. In Florida, we fight against wasteful spending. I have vetoed billions and billions of dollars in spending over the course of my governorship. We have a $1.2 trillion economy, and our state debt is only $17 billion. That's the second lowest debt ratio in the entire United States of America. If our government was doing that nationally, our national debt would be $1 trillion instead of $32 trillion, but that's not what they've done. The state of Florida has millions of more people than the state of New York does now. Didn't used to be that way, and a lot of them came down to our state. You know, when we started getting a lot of flood with COVID, I would have, look, I didn't tell them to do this, but these are people that support me. They would go to the supermarket. They would look for New York license plates. They would put a flyer in the windshield and say, "Don't vote down here like they vote up there." And by and large, they didn't. They voted the way we wanted. And so New York has millions fewer people now. Their budget is twice the size of the state of Florida's budget. And yet we have better infrastructure, we have better services, and we have higher performing education. So where is that money going? Don't tell me you can't run government better than how they're running it in Washington, D.C. So we will lean in on that. We are not just going to accept every bloated spending bill that people like Pelosi and Schumer dredge up. You know, we're going to fight for taxpayers, and we're going to fight to limit spending so that we can limit inflation. Another thing we're going to do, we are going to be fully energy independent. We're opening everything up. We're going to produce our own energy here in this country. So I was in California, right? And they can't even keep the lights on consistently as it is, because they've got all these green mandates and everything. And I can tell you, being from a hurricane-prone state, and people in South Carolina, have to experience these storms too. When a storm comes by, there's a lot of things you do, search and rescue, all that, of course. But the number one thing for kind of the community as a whole is get the power back on. If you get that power back on quickly, everything else becomes much easier. If you're in a situation like they've had in other parts of the country, 4, 5, 6 weeks without power, everything, people get, it's just not a good situation. Well, I can tell you as governor, when we need the power back on, it ain't coming on because of windmills. It ain't coming on because of solar. It's coming on because of oil and gas. And so you need it. You need a reliable energy grid. So in California, they have all these green mandates, so they can't even keep the power on. I think like a couple weeks after Hurricane Ian hit Florida, almost a Category 5 last September, you could see where the power's on. And obviously the day after Ian, we had a lot of power outages. But like 2-3 weeks later, somehow California had more than we did, and we had just recovered from a major hurricane. It's because they have these mandates. So now, what are they doing? They're going to force all new vehicles in just a few, relatively short period of time to be electric vehicles. So they already can't get enough power to do what they need to do, and you're going to have 10 million people plugging in to try to do their electric vehicles. They're not going to be able to handle it. So reliable energy is important from an economic perspective and a security perspective, and so we're going to do that. We're going to reverse policies like Biden is doing to try to force you to buy an electric vehicle. That's your choice what you want to buy. I want a normal car. I think that's the best, but to each their own. We're also going to recognize the threat posed by the Communist Party of China. And there's a variety of threats, clearly as a matter of national security. When you have a country that wants to put an eavesdropping center and or a military outpost in Cuba, 90 miles off our shores, that's something you take seriously. It's not something Biden's taking seriously. Did you hear what he said the other day? Oh, don't worry about China. We don't care about China. And that's not the right attitude to have. From a national security perspective, they are a threat. And there's a bunch of stuff we'll do, and I'll talk some about that. From a society perspective, they have a lot of influence over our society. In Florida, we've acted to combat that. We banned Confucius institutes from our universities and our colleges. They put these institutes in, and they use it to spread propaganda, Communist Party propaganda. And so that has no place in our society. That should be done nationwide. We've also prohibited the purchase of land in Florida by the CCP and related entities. Farmland, none of that stuff. Why would we want them involved in our food supply? It's an issue of economics and security, but the national security, kind of their influence they wield, they're able to do this stuff because we as a country have become so dependent on them in terms of economics, and we don't have economic sovereignty from them. We need to do it. We have really important things that we need for the security of this country that we rely on China for. Provisions for nuclear weapons come from China. A lot of our defense stuff comes from China. When COVID hit, all the medical stuff came from China. That is not, the microchips, all this stuff, that is not good for our economic security or national security. And so we need to start doing more of that here in this country. And they're good jobs. It'll be good for our security, and it'll be great to have a stronger industrial base. And so we want to build a stronger industrial base. Part of it is U.S. policy has benefited for many decades kind of information technology companies, the Googles and the Facebooks and all that. And look, they have a role, but man, I would much rather have advanced manufacturing and advanced industry, a tax system and a regulatory system that's trying to foster that. So that's what we're going to do, and I think it's going to be very important. And part of what you do with that is recognize, like we have in Florida, a 4-year degree from a traditional brick and ivy university is one way you can be successful. It is not the only way you can be successful, and it's not the best way for a lot of people. So we believe in the value of workforce education. We believe in the value of vocational education. In Florida, we start in middle school now. I just signed legislation. We're getting it in middle school. High schools, kids can get certified in things that are really pertinent for industry, like aviation mechanics. You can graduate. Elon Musk's company has hired people to the Space Coast of Florida right out of high school. We have done a lot in logistics because we've got ports and we need truck drivers. When I became governor, Florida produced about 500 truck drivers a year. We're now producing 3,500 truck drivers a year because we've invested in these programs. And so I did education because, like, I was a blue-collar kid. I started working minimum wage jobs, put myself through school. I thought, if I get education, it will help me open doors. And, I took out loans and all that stuff, ended up volunteering for the Navy and made less than probably every single one of my classmates made. But, duty calls, so I was happy to serve. And so we did that. But, I look back and I think, okay, that may have worked for me, but how many other kids my age were told, you won't be successful unless you get some piece of paper? So they go to some university, they go $100,000 in debt, and their degree's in zombie studies. Well, guess what? A lot of times you end up working at a job you could have at a high school anyways. And so if that's really what you want to do, that's fine. But I think a lot of people were pushed in that direction, and it's almost like they're looking down on people who went and got concrete skills. You're not any better than anyone because you have that four-year degree. And so let's just understand there's more than one pathway. And I think there's a lot we can do to elevate the importance of workforce education. Lord knows we pump a lot of money into these universities. And you know what they do when they do the debt, when they do the loans? The universities raise tuition and pocket the increased federal aid. And what do they do with the increased tuition coming in? Are they making the school better? No, they're putting it into administrative bloat most of the time and just hiring more people that aren't affecting the quality education. So that's not what we want. We don't want people with that debt millstone around their neck. Incidentally, in Florida, we don't let our universities raise tuition. So it's about $6,400 in state for tuition at the University of Florida, Florida State, and all those places, and we're holding the line on that. Our view is you guys deliver an education that's affordable. I don't want anyone to have to be deep in debt just to get a college degree. So we're on that as well. And one of the things we need to do to make sure that there's more of an emphasis on practical education, not just support workforce programs, but at the universities, they should be responsible for defaulted student loan debt. If you produce somebody that can't pay it back, that's on you, and you should have to do that, and we'll get that done. So I think that there's a lot we can do in all those areas, and we'll look forward to do it. The other thing that we will do starting on day one is that I pledge to be the president that finally brings the issue of our southern border to a conclusion, to an end. We'll declare a national emergency on day one. We'll use every lever of power, including the military, to stop the invasion of our country, to build the wall that we were promised. And we'll hold Mexico accountable for what they've let go on. And you can be sure we're going to hold the drug cartels accountable for the carnage that they've caused in this country with the fentanyl coming in. The party is over when we get in on January 20th, 2025. And it's important that we do that. And look, you see the problems. Millions of people coming illegally, criminal aliens coming, people on the terror watch list, all the narcotics coming in, tens of thousands of fentanyl overdose deaths. But even just stepping back from that, a country either has borders or you don't. And if you don't, you're not a country. So this is just a question of basic competence. It's a question of national prestige. And what's happening at the border really is a humiliation for our country and a humiliation for this president who doesn't have the wherewithal to even enforce the borders of our own country. So we're not going to tolerate that anymore, and we will get it done. And that will start on day one. Believe you me, that will happen. Another thing we're going to do is, I've been around, for however many decades now. You all have experience. I have never seen in this country greater violations of freedom than I did around this country during COVID-19. They use that as a pretext to shutter churches. They closed churches, but in some of these liberal jurisdictions, you could go to liquor stores, even strip clubs, and do that. And this is a constitutional right. They forced, under Biden, they wanted to force you to either take a COVID mRNA shot or lose your job. These are nurses who people said were heroes for serving COVID patients in 2020. Then they had to do this. Some of them didn't want it. And what, you're going to fire them for doing that? And this was a shot that was emergency use. It wasn't even approved with normal authorization. And how could it have been approved? They were only working on it for a year and a half. So the fact that the government, the federal government, said you are not going to be able to put food on your table for your family unless you bend the knee to us was a gross violation of the liberty of the people of this country. And the hysteria was bad. The hysteria was bad. And all I can tell you this in Florida is, as a leader, when you're there, the buck stops with you. You do not subcontract out your leadership to health bureaucrats. You can listen to people, give advice, you can consult, but ultimately you have to be the one to make the decisions. And in Florida, when the chips were down, when there was a lot of uncertainty in the air, a lot of fear, a lot of hysteria, we had to stand in the breach and we had to do what was right. It wasn't right for me politically at the time. I was getting beat over the head every single day, nonstop, by the left, by the media, by bureaucrats. Fauci was attacking Florida. I even had a lot of Republicans that were attacking what we were doing. And I had supporters say, you really need to think about reversing course here, because your political career is going to be over if you keep going in this direction. And that may have been true. I didn't know it was going to happen. But a leader looks out for the jobs of the people he represents and prefers their interest to his own political hide. And that's what we did. And we stood up and we protected people's jobs and freedoms and kids being in school. And oh, by the way, they didn't want the kids to be in school. We said, every school district in Florida, you better have those doors open because we're going to hold you accountable if you don't. And you ended up seeing the kids in school in Florida. And of course it was the right thing to do. And I will note, they're now acknowledging catastrophic learning loss in a lot of these blue states. In Florida, our fourth grade reading, from pre-COVID to post-COVID, there was no learning loss for fourth grade reading, and that's pretty incredible that happened. But here's the thing. We need to usher in a reckoning and accountability for those policies that were so destructive. Fauciism was wrong. Fauciism was destructive. And if we don't hold those people accountable, they will try to do it in the future, and we can never let this happen to our country ever again. I mentioned that truth needs to be our foundation, and I think one of the biggest threats to truth is the woke mind virus and woke ideology. Some people say, oh, don't worry about this, who cares, just do this, that. I care because, quite frankly, I think that being rooted in truth matters for its own sake. Don't tell me that a man can get pregnant and expect me to accept that. I will not. It is not true. And we're not going to delude ourselves to think otherwise. But don't let anybody tell you that woke doesn't affect your life. If woke is able to take over our economy through things like ESG, where they use corporations to do a political agenda, attack energy, all these things, the average American family will be poorer as a result of that policy choice. If we allow woke to take over the education system like it has in some parts of the country, the average American student will be dumber as a result of that. And if we allow woke to take over the criminal justice system, like we've seen in San Francisco, Los Angeles, these other places, the average American will be less safe in their communities. And so this is fundamental. This is something that we have to contest. And in Florida, we fought the woke in the corporations. We fought the woke in education. We fought the woke in the halls of the legislature. We do not surrender to the woke mob. We've made our state the place where woke goes to die. And some people say, you know, don't have these fights, all this stuff. So we had a situation in Florida where we're like, you know, our education system's going to be about teaching students to learn, not about indoctrinating students with ideological agenda. And we're going to draw that line in the sand. And so we've done things like, you know, eliminate CRT. We did things like, say, no gender ideology in these schools, particularly for these young kids. To tell a first grader that they were born in the wrong body or that their gender's a choice is wrong. It has no place in our schools, and it's not fair to parents, and it's not fair to kids. So we were very clear on that. Now, the parents in Florida really appreciate that, and not just Republicans, okay? Because parents want their kids going, learning. These other issues should not be imposed, and so that we had broad support there. But the left didn't like it, the media didn't like it, and we actually had a business in Central Florida, some of you may have heard of, that didn't like it, called Disney. But you know, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution and the people of the state of Florida. I don't delegate my leadership to a woke corporation based in Burbank, California. We don't back down. We do what's right. People told me you can't stand up to them because they're too powerful, because then they've run Florida for really 60 years, that you're not going to win that fight if you stand your ground. Well, here I stand. I have not backed down an inch. We're standing for our kids. And I have Republicans, some of these Republicans are attacking me for siding with the youth and the parents, and they're siding with Disney and the ideological agenda. Well, here's the deal. I oppose the sexualization of minors. I will do battle with anybody that seeks to rob our children of their innocence, and there will not be any compromise on those principles. Here we stand. We'll get that done. That's right. Stand your ground. Don't back down. When we talk about reinstalling integrity in our institutions, we mean things like our own military. You know, I volunteered to serve in the Navy, volunteered to serve in Iraq, got to serve alongside a lot of great patriots, got to be part of a mission greater than myself, and really was happy to have done it. You know, I was much poorer in the pocketbook as a result of that, but much richer in experience and camaraderie and a love of country. And so I wouldn't trade it for the world. I think most veterans who've served, even in difficult circumstances, feel the same way. And yet, for the first time in my life, I have veterans coming up to me all too frequently saying, I don't know if I'd want my kids or grandkids to serve in today's military. Why? Because they're focusing on political agendas, woke ideology, things that are not central to mission accomplishment. That causes morale to decline, and it causes recruiting to suffer. And even at the height of the fighting in Iraq and places like Fallujah, where I served, you still had people showing up to sign up for the Marine Corps and the Army, knowing their next stop was going to be Western Iraq. And yet now, there's not a place people are necessarily going to be sent, obviously, and yet people are not signing up because they want to sign up to a military that is focused on the mission. They don't want to join a woke military. They don't want to be part of social experimentation. And so as Commander-in-Chief on day one, we rip all the woke out and we get back to business in the military. We're going to be serious about it. We'll get it done. We'll get it done. We'll get it done. And another part of integrity in institutions is we need to reconstitutionalize this federal government. It's out of control. Our founders created 3 branches of government. They did not create in our Constitution a 4th branch of government, an administrative state that is unaccountable to the American people, but that is what has developed. You have a lot of the most important things in our society, what kind of energy you can use, what kind of cars you can drive, are decided not by your elected representatives in Congress, but by nameless, faceless bureaucrats imposing rules on society. They do not have proper authority to do that, and we're going to go about the business of returning this government to its rightful owners, we, the American people. Now, to do that, we have to recognize, so we look at things like the weaponization of government. I mean, I remember the IRS targeting conservative groups back in 2012 cycle, and we've seen on and on it goes, the abuses that have happened where this power has been weaponized. This is not anything the founders would have thought to be remarkable. They would have predicted exactly what's happening. If you don't have power held accountable, then human nature being what it is, they are going to abuse the power. That is just government 101 for people like James Madison and Alexander Hamilton. So we need a new era of accountability with these agencies in D.C., and we will bring that. On day one with me, you'll have a new FBI director. You're going to have the Justice Department cleaned out. We're going to be reducing the footprint in Washington, D.C. We're going to be issuing an edict to all cabinet secretaries to reduce the footprint of their agencies in Washington, D.C. by at least 50%. Fire people, attrition, send them to Dubuque, whatever you want to do, but we have too much consolidation of power in Washington, D.C., and we need to do something about it. And the way I view it is this. For far too long, this bureaucracy has imposed its will on us. It's about time we impose our will on it, and that's what we're going to do. Now, none of this matters. It's all good, and there's going to be so much more we're going to do. None of this matters if you don't win. There's no substitute for victory. And we've been blowing elections. We've developed almost a culture of losing where we lose winnable elections all across this country. We have 49 Republican U.S. senators. We should have 55 Republican U.S. senators right now. And if we did, we would be trillions of dollars less in debt as a result of that and wouldn't have had a lot of other catastrophic policies be enacted under Biden. And so we're not getting a mulligan on 2024. We're either going to do it or we are going to suffer the consequences, because if the Democrats get in again, they're going to pack the U.S. Supreme Court with liberal activist justices, erasing the conservative majority for the rest of our lives. They're going to make Washington, D.C. a state. They're going to eliminate the Electoral College, and they are going to eliminate voter ID in every corner of this country. Now, that's not an agenda that's appealing to the desires of the average American family over their dinner table. They're worried about crime and groceries and all these things. No, it's an agenda where they're playing for keeps. They want to hold power, and they don't want us to have a say in the affairs of the government, and that's what they're going for. And so I think the stakes are very, very high, and it's incumbent upon us to rise to the challenge. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. President Reagan said, freedom's one generation away from extinction. It's not passed along in the bloodstream. And I used to think that was a little bit of an exaggeration. After all, we have a constitution. We have freedom in our DNA. Could we really lose it? but I think you've lived through these last many years. You appreciate freedom is fragile. Freedom is not something that we can take for granted. So we have an obligation to be a generation at this moment of need to step up and get the job done. And I'm motivated to do it because my wife and I have 6, 5, and 3-year-olds that we want them to be able to have great opportunities. Eventually we'll have grandkids, and I think you all feel the same way. But one of the things I'm motivated to do, and one of the reasons why I'm running, is we owe a debt to a lot of people who've come before us, who've sacrificed and given for this country. And I get reminded of this. You fly up to Washington, D.C. sometimes when I used to go up there, and there was one route that you could take going into Reagan Airport, and you would be flush parallel to the National Mall. And so if you looked out the left side of the plane, you would see, like, right there, Lincoln Memorial, Reflecting Pool, Washington Monument, all the way up on the hill, the beautiful U.S. Capitol building, and you feel a sense of pride for what those represent in terms of ideals of this country, and you feel good about it. But what I realized after doing that trip a number of times, the best monuments were not on the National Mall out that left side of the plane. Because if you looked out the right side of the plane, you looked over the Potomac River, and you saw a series of very small, nondescript monuments orderly arranged over the rolling hills of a place called Arlington National Cemetery. And it occurred to me that you could have the best Constitution in the world, you can have the best Declaration of Independence in the world, you can have great presidents and all these things. None of it goes on autopilot, and if you don't have people who are willing, when duty calls, to stand up, put on a uniform, risk their lives, and indeed give their lives for the cause of freedom, then none of that stuff's going to amount to very much. And so my motivation is making sure we're doing justice to those sacrifices of people through prior generations. It requires us to stand firm for truth. It requires us to be resolute in defense of our enduring American principles, and it requires us to stand our ground and not back down from a fight. And we're going to have a fight coming up. But I'll tell you this, you know, if you get me to be the nominee for the Republican Party in 2024, no excuses. I will get the job done. We will be inaugurated on January 20th, 2025 as the 47th President of the United States. Thank you. We will do it. I want your support. I need your support. God bless you guys. Thank you. I'm going to take some questions if anybody has any. Anybody? Yes, sir.
Governor, I don't want to ask a question. I want to make a statement. I've been involved in presidential politics since 1960. I'm almost 85 years old. Wow. Having said that, I've seen it all. On a recent trip down to Florida, my wife and I listened to your book. When we got done, I said, honey, if I made a spreadsheet and I put everything on that spreadsheet that I thought a president should have, you checked every box.
God bless you, sir. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you for that. Appreciate you. You look good for 85. Really good. Look strong. Yes, sir.
Hey, sir, so excited to be here today, and I'm so encouraged by your exemplary military service. I'm a Marine veteran, and
Semper Fi.
Thank you so much for your comments, because I am gravely concerned and disturbed how the wokeness agenda is penetrating our military. Greatly disturbed by that. And important too, if I may, in just how passive we are to China's infiltration, their advances on us. So how do we forward that? You've really explained it, but how do we forward that ship, sir?
No, I agree. So thank you. Thank you for your service. We appreciate you. God bless our Marine Corps. So I actually think they're related. I don't think we can meet the challenges that we face from countries like China if we don't have a very healthy culture in our military. I think you have to make sure that we are not going to let the services be corrupted by left-wing ideology. When I was in, it was normal. People didn't do any of that stuff. It was mission, and that's what you focused on. And part of that is we want people to rise through the ranks based on merit and achievement. not based on whether they check any of this box or that box. And that's what we're going to do. And so we talked a little bit about China, but I would say, because I think passive is a good word, we've allowed China to exert a huge amount of influence right here at home. We never allowed the Soviet Union to have as much influence even close. Yeah, they had some spies in the government, as of course they would do, but we never had our economy so intertwined with the Soviets. We never had the Soviets with footholds in every major American university, funding research and things, stealing secrets, all the things that they have done. And the question is China a threat or not? Biden's people are basically saying, no, we're all just part of a global community, and China is one of the nations in this great global community. That is not true. First of all, we are Americans, okay? We're not part of some global community. Yeah, we deal with other nations, but our goal is to look after our own people first. That's what you do as a country. And so, to say somehow we're going to maybe subordinate something that's good for our country to try to curry favor with a country like China, to me is just a total non-starter. We are going to do what we need to do economically, locally here in terms of our culture, and militarily with the sole focus on protecting this country and defending the freedom of our citizens. And so that's how I'm going to look at all these issues, and we're going to look at all these with a very clear eye, particularly when it comes to the Chinese Communist Party. Who else we got? Anybody else? Where we got? Right here?
Thank you, Governor DeSantis. As a law enforcement officer, I've been inspired by your support for law enforcement in Florida.
Where do you work?
I work in Aiken.
Okay, good.
15 miles away. But your support has inspired me, even when the left is trying to demonize law enforcement, defund law enforcement. Can you talk about your support for law enforcement as governor and then as president? How can you support local law enforcement officers that protect North Augusta, Aiken, Edgefield, the smaller communities?
Thank you. What's your name? Hey, thank you for your service. We appreciate you very much. Well, I can tell you a lot of what we did in Florida. First of all, when you had the BLM riots, you never saw me marching against the police like these other politicians were. We stood with the police from day one because we recognize attacking people who wear the uniform is not going to make our community safer, and it's very disrespectful for people that work so hard to serve our communities. But what we noticed was, okay, they're trying to defund law enforcement across this country. Now, we would never do that in state government because, we have a Republican legislature and you have me, and I would veto if they tried to do it, and our legislature wouldn't do it. But, a lot of the defund was on the local level. And yeah, Florida, we've kind of made it a red state, if you guys have been following recently, in terms of our success, and we're proud of that. But, any municipality could have like 3 bozos on the city commission that want to do something stupid, go on some ideological joyride and try to defund their law enforcement. And so we actually passed legislation that I signed that said local governments in Florida are not allowed to defund police. You take the money out, we're putting it back in, and we're keeping the cops on the street. I'm not going to let our citizens suffer because of your delusions. And so we were very strong on that. But then what we said was, okay, if other folks are defunding police, we're going to show support. So we've done, this year will be the 3rd year in a row, we've done $1,000 bonuses for every sworn law enforcement officer and firefighter in the entire state of Florida. That's a lot of people. We're a big state. And the thing about it is, and we do because, we understand taxes, so it's $1,000 in your pocket, so it ends up being like $1,300 and whatever. So we pay the taxes for you. But the thing is, and look, it's nice to have. $1,000 doesn't go as far as it used to with inflation and everything, so it isn't like these guys are going to be living high on the hog just from that bonus. But what it was, they get a letter signed by me saying, thank you for your service, the state of Florida has your back. And it wasn't about the money, it was about knowing that they were appreciated in this state. And I know that that's something that is spread because when I was in California, I was talking with one of the police chiefs in one of the local communities, and I say, how's things going? And they're like, oh, we're getting along. I was like, really? He was like, well, he's like, well, you know, all our police officers want to move to Florida now because of all you're doing. And part of what we do, if you move to Florida from another state, you get a $5,000 signing bonus right off the top. And so New York, San Francisco, it's very enticing to come, and we need to do it. So as president, I don't want to have the federal government micromanaging how you do your job. There's some on the left that want to handicap what you can do as a police officer. I think that's a huge mistake. That's not something that I would want to do. But, you know, we can provide positive support, and there are different programs and stuff, but I think the bully pulpit, to have the president come out and not indulge in any of the nonsense. You know, some of the stuff when Obama was president, he would take the side against the police, and things like Ferguson, they would say, hands up, don't shoot. That was false. That never happened. They did an investigation. Even Eric Holder had to say that it wasn't true. And so what I think happens is, particularly the corporate media, they want to do narratives, and they want to do anti-police narratives. And so if there's any type of an incident, they are going to try to take that and run with it in a way that is very divisive and oftentimes is just factually not true. I mean, there was one instance of self-defense where, you know, you had someone coming after somebody else and the police officer engaged because I think she had a knife or something. And some of the news stations would play and they would edit out the fact that the assailant had a knife and acting like it was just like shooting an innocent person. So they have an agenda, and it's hostile to law enforcement. And, you know, as governor, I go out, I have a platform, I can speak the truth. The fact that I'm in San Francisco and I have cops coming up to me thanking me, it shows that the truth resonates. People want to hear the truth. They want you to cut through the noise. And as president, you know, you have the biggest bully pulpit of all, and we will use that to promote law and order all across this country. You can take that to the bank. Who else we got back here?
Hello, Governor.
Is that the you?
Yeah, yes. I have visited Florida twice last year, and I'm a resident of Augusta. I want to say, can you promote the Bright Line more nationally, the high-speed rail?
Okay, yeah. Did you take it?
Yes.
Okay, and what's your name?
Santonio Hobbs.
Okay, saying you took it in Miami, Palm Beach, where?
Yeah, Miami to West Palm.
Okay, good.
Yes, I want to say, can you promote that more? Because I mean, rail in the South. I mean, that's amazing. That's a great start. And I just love it.
Oh, good. Yeah, you know, people love it. Interesting thing. So this is a high-speed train in Florida, but not funded by the taxpayers. It's privately funded. They have it from Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm. It's going to soon open into Orlando. They're eventually going to connect it to Tampa. And so my view is in California, they've sunk like tens of billions of dollars into like a failed high-speed rail. This Bright Line it's cost billions, but all privately financed and all privately done. Now, I personally like to control my own destiny being in a car, so I'm not somebody that would probably use it as much. Some people are different. But if it's privately financed at a fraction of the cost of what it's doing there, it can be economical. So we would promote private investment in transportation and infrastructure, and I think this is an example of Florida where these things work. Incidentally, you know, we have a responsibility for, as government in transportation and infrastructure. We had Hurricane Ian come through the state of Florida at the end of September, and it did a lot of damage, and I had mentioned with the power, and that was a challenge. But probably the biggest challenge was the search and rescue, which we had great response. But then the next morning, or the afternoon, next morning you go out, there was a bridge going to Pine Island that got destroyed. And then the causeway going to Sanibel was severed in 3 places. And so these folks are being told 6 months, get off those islands, you're not going to be able to get back. And it wasn't state roads or bridges, but they came to me and asked for help. Governor, can you help us? And I'm like, of course I'm going to help you. You know, some people don't like getting involved because the minute you take ownership, if it doesn't go well, people blame you. But I'm like, no, we're going to do it. So I got my guys together. I said, listen, No bureaucracy, no red tape, and no excuses. I am not waiting months. I want this done as soon as possible. So we accepted the job for the Pine Island Bridge. They didn't wait months. The bridge was constructed in 3 days. And then we did Sanibel Causeway in 2 weeks, 3 different breaks that we did. And so it just shows you, you can always find excuses why you can't do something. I think the job of a leader is to figure out a way to do something. And so we'll be very active in terms of our infrastructure. Like, we should be able to permit a pipeline for natural gas and not take 3 years to do it. We used to be able to build things. Build the Golden Gate Bridge, Empire State Building. Now it would take 20 years to probably even break ground on some of this stuff. It's just that crazy. So we want to get America moving again on that, and that means we're going to be very tough on the bureaucrats, and we're going to make sure that they're working, and if they don't, they're fired. We're going to get rid of them. Okay, where else are we? Yes. Oh yeah, of course. I think. So she asked about like nuclear power. Our aircraft carriers run on nuclear energy. I mean, I was actually stationed in Mayport, Florida when the John Kennedy got decommissioned. That was the last non-nuclear aircraft carrier that we have. It's very clean. What they're doing is they're increasingly coming up with ways where it can be a very small footprint, very, very safe. And I think you're going to start to see a lot of private capital flow into that. But the question is, for us, do we want to make it impossible for them to do it, or do we want to give them a pathway to do it? I think that you will see it become economical very, very soon. It's not economical now because of the way, partially because of the way the government treats. Yeah, exactly. So, okay, yes, ma'am.
I think your wife is going to make a beautiful first lady.
Amen to that. Amen to that. You don't got to convince me of that one. We got back here.
Governor DeSantis. Oh, Governor DeSantis.
What's your name? What's your name?
I'll hold that to the end.
Okay.
All right, let me make my statement first. I'm here on behalf for requests for a couple of broken veterans with service-connected disease, illness, and injury. And we are saying, please, please, will you decriminalize marijuana in 2025?
I don't think we would do that, but I think what I've done in Florida is we have a medical program through our Constitution that the voters did, and so the veterans who are in those situations in Florida, you know, they're actually allowed access. It's very controversial because obviously there's some people that abuse it and are using it recreationally, but I will say this, nationally, or even on the local level, you know, this stuff is very powerful now that they're putting on the street. And when these kids do it, it's really bad for the youth. And I just think we have to be very united as a society. We want our kids to stay clear of drugs, and we don't want to do policies that's going to make it have easier access for them. You don't even know what they're putting in some of this stuff now because you have things like fentanyl that can wind up. And so if you do something with that, it could be good night right then and there, and you could die just by ingesting that. So I think that that's problematic. I think that we have too many people using drugs in this country right now. I think it hurts our workforce readiness. I think it hurts people's ability to prosper in life. And just from my experience growing up in the Tampa Bay area in Florida, the kids in high school that got involved in that I went with, you know, all suffered. All their activities, all their grades, and everything like that. So particularly for the youth, I just think we have to be united. Incidentally, my wife, the First Lady of Florida, she has a program where we go into the schools now, and we've got athletes and people that have endorsed, and it's called Your Facts, Your Future, but it's explaining to these kids what are the stakes of using some of these drugs nowadays. And this is not something you want to mess around with. You don't know what they're putting in this stuff, and we need to educate the kids. Yeah, we're going to stop fentanyl or work, you know, do the border, all that, and you got to fight the supply, put the dealers in prison for a long time, but you also got to work on demand, and you also have to work on treatment for people once they get addicted. And we've actually done that in Florida too. We have an opioid recovery network that we started. We now have it in 17 counties. When people go in and they get the support they need, the relapse rate has been less than 10%, which is really, really good. And so we're going to continue doing things like that. Yes.
Okay. Hey, Mr. Governor, I love what you're doing in Florida. I really support it, and I like that you use the Reagan quote, "Freedom is one generation away," because that is the motto for a program that I'm part of. It's in 48 states, YMCA's Youth in Government. So my question is on civics and civic education. So many people who I know, they don't know about government. They don't know, if they can vote. They don't know who they're voting for. Would you support increased civic education as president?
What's your name?
Drew.
Okay, are you in school still?
Yeah, I'm a junior in high school.
Oh, congratulations, man. Thank you for doing this. So, 100%. So we've done this in Florida. The headlines focus on things like, we're not having CRT in the school, and you shouldn't have it. I mean, it's an ideological agenda. But that's fine to say what you're against. What are you for? And so what we said in Florida, we're for education about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and our founding principles, and in teaching students what it means to be an American. Why have people fought and died for this country or been willing to risk their lives for this country? And it's important. And so we've done a lot of things. So teachers now, so I said, okay, it's fine to have standards. We have great standards. You have to know the Constitution, the Federalist Papers, all this stuff, all really important. But you got to have teachers that have a passion for it and that are going to be strong in delivering the curriculum. And so we created a boot camp for teachers in Florida where if you go through it, it's 50 hours. We got people from like Hillsdale College, all these places to offer lessons on this. So it's 50 hours, and it goes through everything. It'll go through the Enlightenment influences on the founding, Judeo-Christian tradition, anything you can think of, British common law. Like, you are getting every single influence that led to the formation of the United States of America in this 50-hour course. You go through the course, we give you a $3,000 bonus for going through the course. So it's voluntary. They don't have to do it, but we've provided a financial incentive to do it. Now, the media hated that we were doing this because these are not concepts that they want. But, the satisfaction rate of the course was almost 90% from all the teachers that went through it. So we've worked hard to do that, and we think it's important. We also now proctor a end of high school civics exam similar to an exam that naturalized immigrants have to do when they become citizens. And so we're not where we need to be in results yet, but this is a new thing. Just since I've been governor, we've done better in our civics performance. But here's why I think it's important. You can go on so many different paths when you leave our school system. But no matter what path you take, every single person we produce is going to be a citizen of this republic. And I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that when they're graduating and going out in the real world, they're not just listless vessels, that they actually have a foundation of knowledge about the principles that have made this country unique. So that's an obligation we've taken on. That's something that's very good. And as president, we will promote that model nationwide, 100%. Okay. Yes.
Hi, Governor DeSantis. How are you today?
What's your name?
My name is Melinda Ball. Thank you so much for coming to North Augusta and speaking to us today. My question for you is about women in sports. I'm asking this question because of my daughter, Melanie. She couldn't be here today because she is winning a golf tournament right now over in Barnwell County.
Good.
So I'm a proud native Floridian. I'm also a proud graduate of Florida State University as well. But I'm also a proud mother and a proud wife. And my concern is men in women's sports. What are you going to do to keep men out of competing in women's sports?
Thank you. Best of luck to your daughter. Not a bad place probably to grow up playing golf. I heard there's a decent course down the road from here. Little decent tournament too. So we've already done it in Florida. So this is years ago. I didn't wait around. And we passed legislation to say that girls and women athletes can compete with fairness and integrity, and they can't have men butting into their competitions. And that's just the way it is in Florida, and that's the way it needs to be nationwide. How is it okay that you compete on the men's team for 3 years, then you switch to the women's team and you win the women's championship? When that happened in the NCAA, the quote second place finisher, she was actually from Sarasota, and she was the fastest actual women's swimmer. So I did a proclamation from the governor's office saying that what the NCAA was doing was wrong, that it was a fraud to say that our swimmer from Florida was not the best, and that we, as the state, deemed her to be the fastest women's collegiate swimmer in the 500-yard freestyle. So my wife and I, we have a 6-year-old daughter, 5-year-old son, and a 3-year-old daughter at home, and so it's personal to us just because we want our daughters to be able to have opportunities. If they want to be, and they're good in different things. They're actually now, they just got in this week in camp, they got into tennis, and they're liking that. They've done t-ball, swimming, all these things. And we're not going to push them to do what they want. But if they want to do those things, being able to compete with fairness and with games that have integrity is important for them. How demoralizing is it when you had those women swimmers on the thing, and these are like, they're smaller, and then you have, 6'4", it's like people are just looking at that, and that picture really was an indelible image because it shows you how farcical our society is becoming, that we would actually go down that road. So we led in Florida on it. We'll get it done nationally with the authority that we have as well, because I think it's a larger issue. Even then, opportunities for my daughters or your daughter, it's about, are we going to be a society rooted in truth, or are we going to be a society that's going to be rooted in the latest ideological fad? Truth will set us free, and that's what we're going to do here. So,
Governor DeSantis, I'll be honest, my wife is totally 100% on board. I'm still open. I know who I'm not going to vote for, but I'm still open. And segueing off this stuff here, one of the things the left does is they play the long game, and they've had a stranglehold on the education system from kindergarten to higher education. Are you going to do something to empower parents to have the choice to find the schools that we believe is best for our kids?
100%. We've already done it in Florida. So, and you're right, education, the school system should serve the community. They should not become captive to one ideological faction in our society. And the school system does not supersede the rights of parents. Parents have the fundamental right to direct the education and upbringing of their kids. And that involves a lot of things. In Florida, it involves universal education savings accounts. You are in Florida, you want to go to a private school with a private scholarship, you do it. We also have charter schools, which are public, but we've got 370,000 students in charter schools. And those charter schools, yeah, they get funding from the state, but they're entitled to no students as a matter of right. So they have to provide a product that parents are going to pull the trigger and say, yeah, I want to go to that school. If you looked at just our charter population in Florida, it skews poorer, it's much more racially diverse. It would be one of the top 10 performing states in the entire country if it was its separate state, just the charter population. And so in Florida, we just finished in the NAEP number 3 and 4 respectively in fourth grade reading, 4th grade math. I grew up in Florida. We were not number 3 and 4 respectively when I was a kid. So this has been, I think, a rising tide lifts all the boats. I think it's better for parents to have those options. And here's the thing, we have parents working in Miami, they're making a joint income $100,000. You are not living high on the hog on that. And so if you have that scholarship, that could be a big deal. But it has improved our school district's performance too, because they want students as well. And their funding is tied to the amount of students they get. So I think education choice is a no-brainer. I also think we've been the only, I don't think you can find another elected official in the Republican Party who has actually said, I'm not just going to try to beat back the left, we are going to take institutions back from the left. They are not their institutions. They're not their little chew toy that they get to do whatever they want with. We're going to make sure that we have institutions that reflect the values of the community. So you see it with choice. You see it with not having the gender ideology in the schools. You see it what we've done in K-12. Higher education. We're leading on higher education. We just launched this morning in Tampa a lawsuit against the Federal Department of Education going after this accreditation cartel. You know, we look and see, oh, there's some liberal professor and like all this, but that didn't just happen. There's many steps back as to how that happened, and the accreditation cartel is part of the reason it is. They only accredit you if you do certain things. So in Florida, we're doing battle with them because we believe we have the right to run our university system. So now in Florida, all tenured professors must undergo review under 5 years and can be let go for poor performance. We have eliminated so-called DEI from our public universities. They say it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, but that's not how it's practiced. It's discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination, and that has no place in our public institutions. We're going to treat everybody as individuals, not as members of groups. And so, we now say with the faculty, we have the ability of presidents to go and recruit faculty to the universities. If it's all controlled by the faculty union, they will blackball people who don't toe the ideological line. We see it time and time again. Now we've given money to our leadership and our universities. They can go out. They can go to MIT and bring an engineering professor at University of Florida. They could go to Hillsdale and bring someone down to New College in Sarasota. You should look up what we did in New College. So this is a college. It's in Sarasota. It's actually beautiful, right on the water. If those of you who have been to Sarasota know, it's a nice part of the state. And it was supposed to be the top honors college in Florida. Under Florida statutes, that's what it was supposed to be. But in practice, it was like a commune, like left of the left, focusing on gender ideology, CRT, whatever the latest kind of neo-Marxist flavor of the day is. And like, look, if that's your shtick on your own, okay, you know, fine, but not with our tax dollars. That's not a good mission with our tax dollars. So I appointed in January 7 conservative board trustees to the Board of Trustees, including a guy named Christopher Rufo from the Manhattan Institute, who does the CRT. He's exposed a lot of this in corporations, federal government, all that. So Chris got in there. They fired the president, hired a conservative president, eliminated CRT, DEI, and all that, and they rebranded New College and said, we are striving to be the top classical liberal arts college like Hillsdale College is. And so what's happened is, what's interesting about this is professors from around the country started contacting the board members, including actually liberal professors, because even some of the liberal professors know in a lot of these college campuses, it's like walking on eggshells. It's intellectually oppressive, and they just want to be able to speak their mind. They may not be, you know, on the right, but they understand modern academia has lost its way, and they've turned their back on things like free speech. So we have people now that want to come down. A lot of families around the country are saying, you know, I want to be able to send my kid to college and not have the 18 years I worked to give them values be undone in 4. And so now they're looking to New College. And for those of you who have kids in South Carolina, our in-state tuition is lower than a lot of places. Our out-of-state tuition is lower than a lot of places in-state tuition. So New College out-of-state is like $16,000 a year, and we have scholarships for it. So I think you're going to see a lot of people applying. It's because they want to be part of institutions that have intellectual integrity again, and that's what we're bringing in the state of Florida. Back here.
Hello. Thank you for answering my question. I'm Debbie, and I'm actually a veteran. A long time ago, I was in the Women's Army Corps and then also the U.S. Army Reserve. I have a great concern about so many Republican candidates for president right now. It's 11, that they will fracture the vote too much for you to be nominated. What's your opinion?
Not if you guys do your part. The sky's the limit for us. I mean, we can do it. We'll do it. Look, I mean, all I can tell you is this. People can do what they want. The only reason I'm running is to win and to deliver on these promises. That's the only reason. I'm not trying to get my name out there. I don't want to get some contributorship with one of these media outlets. I don't care about any of that. We're running to win and to deliver, and that's really the only reason to run. And I feel compelled to do it because I think that if we muff this one and Biden gets in again, heck, you may end up with Kamala as president even, which would be, when he picked her, a lot of people for VP, a lot of people are like, oh my, why did he do that? Because, obviously she's got issues, but I kind of understand why he did it, because she's the best impeachment insurance money can buy. No matter what he does, no one wants Kamala, so that's kind of where we are with that one. So, okay, yes, sir.
Mike Sanders, Air Force veteran, deeply concerned about our future freedom in Ukraine and how we can make sure that Putin takes a short jump out of a tall window.
Yeah, no, I think he's a bad guy. Look, I think at the end of the day, you have to, as president, your first priority has got to be defend the American people and defend our country. And I get frustrated when they allow an open border here while they're sending money abroad. Do you at least have to care about your own border before you worry about some of these other things? And so I think they've been derelict in defending our own country. And so what I would do is say, okay, what are the priorities? Clearly, we have to defend ourselves, and we have to defend our own border, and we got to make sure we're doing that. And I think that they've really dropped the ball on defending us here domestically. Yes, Putin's a bad guy. Yes, obviously, we have to do to check China. We will work to build the military. We're going to have more power in the Pacific. We're going to do all that. But I don't see how you can be credible abroad if you're not strong at home. So we will be strong at home, and that will help deter bad guys abroad. Yes, sir.
Sir, this will be our final audience question.
Well, first off, I'd like to thank you for the woke conversation. It was very good. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. So,
what's your name?
Alex.
And you're local?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And I would like to know if, when you become president, what will you be doing about the war in Ukraine?
That's just what he just asked that question. So that was so what I said is we are going to be strong at home. We have to be strong at home, and we have to make sure that our resources are being dedicated in ways that are going to defend the American people above all else. So that's going to be our first priority. Then we're going to look with fixing the military, and we'll do that on day one. And then we're going to look at, okay, what's the national security strategy that we're looking for? Our emphasis is going to be on the deterrence of China in the Pacific. When you think about how we've handled international affairs over the years, we have viewed Europe since World War II as the primary theater. Understandably, we had the Soviet Union that we had to contend with. Well, now I think we need, kind of how we had NATO then, I think we need something similar in the Pacific to be able to keep China in check. Because I think in many respects they're more of a threat to us than the Soviet Union even was. Maybe not the nuclear brinksmanship like we had there. We came very close, but they did that. And in Europe, what I would say is with NATO, NATO needs to do more. These countries, they need to produce adequate amount for their own defense, and they should really be taking the lead in ensuring the security of the continent. So I would rely on them to be taking up that mantle, and I think that that's something that's very, very important. So, okay, well, we had some. So should we do some questions from like CNN or somebody? Do we have CNN back here? Okay, CNN. I didn't avoid. No, it was misquoted. I said, here's what I said. I said, you run this process, you compete, and you respect the outcome of the process. And I've always said that. And so that's what I said before. That's what I'll do. I think I'm going to be the nominee. But no matter what happens, I'm going to work to beat Joe Biden. That's what you have to do. Who are you? Okay. So in Florida, we've promoted a culture of life, and we have stood for life, and we've been supportive of policies. And including, we were able to enact a heartbeat bill to protect when there's a detectable heartbeat. I know South Carolina has recently done similar, and I applaud them for doing that. I think it'll make a difference. I think it's humane. I think it'll protect life. I think that the progress right now is being made really from the bottom up. I think places like South Carolina, Georgia, these places have done well. Now, some of these other states, may not necessarily follow suit, but this will be something that people are going to be able to debate. In terms of federal, I am very concerned about what Biden wants to do. He wants federal legislation to override every single pro-life law in the country and force abortion all the way up until the moment of birth in this country. That is inhumane, that is obscene, and that will not happen when I am president. Yes, sir.
And my question to you is primarily about the battle against wokeism. Do you think it's more important to have good public policy, or do you think it's more important to have a cultural, social movement to fight back against this wokeism?
I think they reinforce each other. I think it's a great question. So basically, he was asking about wokeism. Is the policy more important, or is kind of the cultural pushback more important? And I think you need to do both. I mean, so for example, you had this thing with Target, with what they were doing. People responded, consumers responded to devastating effect to their stock price. You remember Bud Light, what has happened with Anheuser-Busch? People stood up and said enough. And, sad to say, this also happened with Disney. If you look at their stock from where it was a year and a half ago, people have I think, revolted against having an agenda shoved down their throats. And so they're voting with their feet and with their pocketbook, and that is making an impact, and I think that that's a good thing. Look, businesses can do, kind of what they want, but I think some of these businesses, they are ignoring their obligation to their shareholders. So, for example, with the Disney kerfluffle we had, they got involved. We had the bill that said no gender ideology in elementary school. And honestly, like 90% of parents agree with that. Disney decided to get in. They tried to tank the bill. And look, from a First Amendment perspective, do they have a right to do it? Was that something that was in the best interest of their shareholders, to stick their beak into that? A family company, historically, now coming on the side of the sexualization of minors? No, I don't think that was smart. And then what they did, because, people said, oh, the governor's not going to be able to stand up to them. They're too powerful. He's not going to sign the bill. Of course I signed the bill. I mean, are you kidding me? I'm not going to not sign the bill. So we signed the bill, and then they put out a statement saying that they were going to devote company resources to getting the law repealed and or getting it overturned in the courts. And, again, from a First Amendment perspective, they have a right to do it. Was that consistent with the fiduciary obligation that they had to their shareholders? Say they're going to take corporate resources and apply it to basically waging war against a core policy of the state of Florida, standing up for the rights of parents? I think it was a massive breach of the fiduciary obligation. Now, we had to make a decision at that point because Disney, since the 60s, they had an arrangement like no others. I didn't give it to them. I wasn't even born when this happened. But they were given their own government in Central Florida. They controlled 40 square miles. It wasn't supposed to evolve this way because they promised to build communities and all this, and so they wouldn't have been able to maintain control. But they never did that. They just kept building theme parks and hotels. And so basically you have this government where they're exempt from laws their competitors have to follow, tax breaks, all this stuff, and no accountability basically. And it had never come up because they were so powerful in Florida, but then this issue, people started saying, maybe we should revisit it. And then we had to make a decision as a state, okay, through decisions that have been made for many decades, the state is joined at the hip with this one company. Are we comfortable putting them on a pedestal, being joined at the hip, giving them special treatment when their corporate ethos supports the sexualization of minors? And as a governor and as a dad, I was not comfortable with that, so we did something about it. We ended their self-governing status in the state of Florida. So that goes into the policy to say, look, we have probably one of the best business environments in the world in Florida. We lead the nation in new business formations. We've had more wealth move in to the state of Florida than has ever moved into over a similar time in any state in American history. I think we had 2020, 2021 combined, I think it was something like $64 billion in adjusted gross income moved into Florida. The second state after us, we were number one in the nation, was Texas, which, they've done well for a long time. Texas had like 15 billion move in. So we were like 3-4 times what Texas was, and obviously California, New York, Illinois are hemorrhaging. So we've got a great business climate. We want everyone to do well. I wouldn't do policy that was bad policy, but I think if any of these corporations are enjoying some special subsidies from a state, and then they want to use that subsidy to go after our policy or to advance an agenda that's hostile, you have every right to yank the subsidy away. You do not have to subsidize these people. And so I think that that's something that we can do. I also think, from a policy perspective, what we did in Florida, we did legislation to kneecap ESG in the state of Florida. And so no ESG in our pension. You have to focus on the best returns, not political considerations. No social credit scores in loans, because what they want to do, you go apply for a home loan, eventually they want to get to a point where there's going to be political considerations going into your credit rating. So we said no on that. And then we said no woke banking discrimination against conservatives. So we put that in law, and we made sure that people were protected against it. And I think it's important because they understand the left. They can't win elections on a lot of their agenda. It's just too unpopular. They want you to pay more for energy. There's a lot of people signing up for that. No, people don't want to do that, and they understand that. So what they figured out is if they can mobilize corporate resources, and they can try to do this through large asset managers, other big companies, they can do through the economy what they could not do through the ballot box. And that raises questions if these companies are exercising public power almost with some of these decisions. Because make no mistake, if every Wall Street bank colludes to say we're not financing anybody that owns a gun store, that is going to impact people's Second Amendment rights, 100%. So they're exercising power that's more public in nature, and the question is that just like an end run around the constitutional system? How do you hold them accountable? So I think we have done things in Florida to kind of reorient our economy back to the traditional role of an economy. And we're trying to depoliticize it, and we're not going to let them operate under a delusion that if they're doing ESG, that somehow they're satisfying their fiduciary obligations. They are not satisfying their fiduciary obligations, and we shouldn't let them do it. So I think there's a role for both, but here's the thing. People are sick of the nonsense. People are ready to fight back. And 2024 is going to be the year when America as a whole finally fights back. Thank you all. God bless you. Thanks so much.